right, good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to be starting off this morning in Colossians chapter 1. And we're going to be talking today about the preeminence of Christ. I want us to begin at verse 9 in Colossians chapter 1. Paul writes, "For this reason also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all might, according to his glorious power, for all patience and long-suffering with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of his love, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence." Jesus is to have preeminence in all things. We probably don't walk around using the word preeminence a lot. We probably don't walk around saying, "Oh yeah, this song is preeminent on my Spotify playlist," or this show it's the preeminent one I watch on Hulu. Right? We don't usually use words like that a lot. It's a big deal. It's a big thing. What exactly does preeminent mean? It means he's sovereign over everything. He is first over everything. He is above and should be above in every place of our hearts, in every aspect of our lives. He should be first. He should be the first one we think of. He should be the first one we turn to when we need him. He should be the first priority in our lives, the first thing we seek in the morning, the first priority in the things of life that we do seek out and the things that we seek understanding in. You know, there's a lot of different things in life that I have sought to understand over the years. Whether it was a new gadget or a piece of technology, I really wanted to understand how it worked, or a new software program, or ham radios, just all kinds of different things, guitar, different things that I wanted to learn more about. I was seeking wisdom about, seeking knowledge about. And whenever I would get like that, I would be like all in. Like that was all I would focus on for a while. I'd get hyper-focused. Maybe not all I focused on, but I put most of my energy into getting as good as humanly possible at that thing for that period of time. And more often than not, I'd get bored with them afterwards, or something else would pull my attention, and that would be the thing that I would be seeking after and after. It shouldn't be that way for Christ in our life. He should be the number one person and thing in our life that we seek after, that we seek more wisdom after. And that's a lifelong thing. I am never going to get to a point where I'm just going to sit back and say, you know what, I've read enough of this Bible. I got a good grasp on it, and I can just skate through the rest of life not caring to know anymore. God is always going to speak through his word to us and continue to sanctify us and help us to grow in him. But above anything else in this world, Christ should be preeminent in our lives, especially in the life of a believer. And I want us to think today about who or what is preeminent in our lives. Maybe Christ is preeminent in our lives, but if we're wise and we're watchful and we're looking, maybe we'll notice some other things are creeping up into a close second place. And there's nothing wrong with having other things in our life that are good and that we prioritize, as long as we're not diminishing the priority of Christ in our lives. And maybe something has crept in that has taken over our focus from God. Maybe something has fully pulled our attention to the point where God's an afterthought. But maybe that's not the case. But we're at risk of that happening. We should be on guard against these things. And that goes along with my study passage this morning from Luke 16:13. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be loyal to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon meaning stuff, basically. I don't ever want to put myself in a position where I love a thing and hate God, or where I am loyal to one thing and despise God, because that's exactly what this verse describes happening. I don't want to risk turning against God because he might take me away from this other thing that I'm cherishing more in my heart. And if Christ is preeminent in my life, he's going to guard my heart against that. In this passage, Paul was writing to the church in Colossae from being imprisoned in Rome. He wrote multiple letters from there to be sent out through that region. And this was in what would be modern-day Turkey. Paul didn't set up this church and establish this church at Colossae, but his co-laborer Epaphras had. And there were some heresies. There were some false teachings about Jesus that were getting spread around in the region at that time, and through many churches as well. There's a lot of opposition against the early church, where established beliefs, customs, other religions, other mindsets, they would have such a firm grasp on people that they were trying to weave those in with the truth of the gospel, weave those in with actual godly and biblical things. And one of those false teachings that was being circulated was to diminish the greatness of Jesus, to diminish the uniqueness and the deity of Jesus. And we've heard so many different heresies and false teachings about Jesus over the years that people believe even today. Some will argue that he didn't exist at all, or he existed but he was just a man who taught some good things, or he was sent by God but he was just a prophet, or he didn't exist until he was born in this world, or he was not fully God and fully man, he was one or the other. And there are so many false teachings like that just go against Scripture and go against the truth of Christ, and they diminish who he is. They can't diminish the truth of who he is, but they diminish the perception of who he is to people around, to people who are seeking him. And there were heresies about his godly nature, about the deity of Christ. And some of those teachings came from people attempting to blend Greek and Jewish ideas into Christianity. And in doing so, what they were really doing was they were watering down the truth about Jesus. And so Paul was calling on the Colossians to reject any ideas, whether secular or religious in some way, that diminished the glory of the image of Christ. And we need to be on guard today even against false teachings that diminish the glory of Christ and his image. And to further glorify the image of Christ, Paul was also calling upon the church to be a reflection of his character. And while Christ, as we read here, while Christ displayed the image of the Father, his people were to reflect the image of Christ, just as we are today. Verse 9, he writes, "For this reason also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you and ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding." We're to pray for one another. We're to pray for other believers. We're to pray that we would grow in wisdom and knowledge and in maturity. And And what he's praying for them for is to be filled with the knowledge of the will of God through wisdom and spiritual understanding. How many of you at some point in your life, maybe even now, at some point in your life, have just kind of agonized over, man, what's God's will for my life? What does he really want for me? What does he have in store for my future? What am I afraid he might call me to? What am I afraid his will might be? But many times I've seen people, whether I hear them talking about it in something I'm listening to, or it's somebody I've spoken with in person who just agonizes, man, I just can't figure out what God's will is for my life. And sometimes the problem is people are so hyper-focused on looking for one grand, specific, major calling, whether it's a pastor or a missionary or a Sunday school teacher or worship leader, or just being able to go witness to your friends better or whatever. They're so focused on this one grand purpose, almost a title of a calling, that they can overlook the fact that there are so many individual, everyday callings that we're all called to. And we grow a greater understanding of those through seeking wisdom and spiritual understanding from God. And if I want to be filled with the knowledge of his will, of what his will is for my life, then first I have to start with seeking wisdom and seeking spiritual understanding. I've got to grow closer to God first. I'm not just going to accept Jesus and before he's done anything else in my life, he very well could, but he's not going to usually jump right in and say, okay, this is what you're going to do and this is what you're going to do. When I was younger and I was saved, if God would have come out the next day and said, hey, by the way, you're going to be a pastor, I'd have gone and hid under a rock somewhere. I almost did it when he told me in my 30s. It's a scary thing, right? But as we grow closer to him, and as we dig into his word, and as we study and meditate on his word, and grow closer to him and have a greater understanding of him, we're going to start living a way of life that is according to his will. God's will isn't just a title. It's not just a specific task. It's not just a commission to one specific thing. As we study God's word, we see all these things that he wants, not just for us to do, but wants for our lives. His will goes beyond, hey, do this. His will also goes into, this is what I want for you. This is the kind of life I want you to have. This is the kind of peace I want you to have through me, and the kind of wisdom and understanding. And this is how I want to change your life and lead you to change the lives of others. But it starts not always with some big thing. A lot of times it starts with smaller individual pieces of God's will. And when I think about this concept, I think about Jesus speaking in his parable in Luke chapter 16:10. I've got a couple versions here. This is from the CSB. Jesus said, he who is faithful in a very little thing is also faithful in much. And he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. God's watching what we do with the little things. How do I handle the little things? He's looking to think, okay, this is how Josh is doing with the little things. I better not, he's not ready for me to give him the big things. Or, man, this lady, she is killing it on the little things. I can see that she's faithful of those. I can give her this bigger thing. I can call her to this bigger thing because I can trust that she'll be faithful in that because she was faithful with a little bit. The NIV version says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will be dishonest with much. How are you doing with the little things? If God looked at you today, would he say that I can trust them with the little things that I ask of them? I can see that they're being faithful in the little things. And as we become more faithful in those things, and as we grow in him, He's going to say, you know what, it's like when you're training somebody at work. You make sure they know what they're doing with what they're doing before you give them a more difficult task. And it's not just about knowing how to do it, because God's going to equip us, but he wants to see that we're faithful. Because a lot of times in a job setting also, you don't necessarily promote the person to manager when their attendance is spotty, or when they're constantly breaking things, or they're always late coming back from break, because they're not being faithful with the tasks that you've given them so far. But when you can see that they're faithfully doing what you're paying them to do, in a job setting, when you see that they're being faithful in those things and they can be trusted with those things, you're more like when you need somebody to trust with something bigger, they're going to come to mind. Or would we come to mind when he's trying to think of someone who has been faithful that he wants to call to something greater? Are we being faithful in God's little callings? That you may walk worthy of the Lord. Paul's going on with what he's praying for the people for at the Church of Colossae. That you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. Now, we talk a lot about good works and the context of them, because there have been a lot of people, even today, but throughout history, that have done, well, we talked about legalism in Sunday school. They turn good works into a source of salvation almost. Even the cartoons do it. The ones who are the most good, who do the most good, are the ones who are going to heaven, right? Wrong. It's not about doing good works to earn salvation, to earn eternity with Christ, to earn eternity in heaven, to earn forgiveness of our sins. We could never earn that. That's why Christ gave it freely. But having been given that gift, we ought to work out our salvation with good works. We ought to serve him with eager hearts, working these good works and producing fruit as a form of worship, as a form of saying thank you. I mean, there's nothing I could do in this world that would ever be great enough to earn or to pay him back. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't do everything I can for him. That should just inspire me to want to do, just like in a work context again. Has anybody ever had a nasty boss who just treated you like garbage? I'm sure maybe one or two of you. How hard did you want to work for that person? What about somebody who treats you good, who shows you respect, who compliments you on the good job you've done? Somebody who is good to you. You want to do a better job for them. You want to please. Who has done more for us than God? Shouldn't we strive after wanting to serve him? So as a believer, we are to produce fruit. Those who are his will produce fruit. It doesn't mean that we're going to constantly be producing fruit all the time. Even the trees produce fruit in seasons. But there's going to be some kind of fruit being produced in our life. And the thing about fruit is, there's a few things to think about fruit. Think of a piece of fruit growing on a tree. One, it's visible. I don't know of a tree that grows fruit inside the trunk that nobody else gets to see. It's visible. And when we produce fruit, it's not visible so somebody can say, wow, look at that awesome stuff that this guy or this lady's doing. It's to say, look at this awesome stuff that God is doing through them. It's so God gets the glory. Fruit should be visible. The fruit also reflects the condition of the tree. I think we talked a while back about a bad tree producing bad fruit. If the plant is diseased and dying, or has some kind of fungus or something wrong with it, you're going to see the effects of that in the fruit. It's not going to be good fruit. But if it's a healthy tree with healthy things inside of it, it's going to produce good fruit. And we produce out of what's in our heart. It's what's produced out of our mouth. It's what's produced out of our actions. So it reflects the condition of the tree. And something else to consider is about fruit is it's for others. If I'm a tree and I'm growing an apple, that's so somebody else can eat it. If I'm producing fruit in this world, it's for God and it's for other people. It's to serve. It's to glorify God before other people. It's to edify. It's to help others grow. And it's Fruit is a product of the faithfulness in those little things of everyday life, those little callings that we were talking about before. And if we're faithful in those, fruit is just going to naturally, start being produced and growing. Verse 11, he continues to pray for them that they would be strengthened with all might, according to God's glorious power, for all patience and long-suffering with joy. I used to think that if somebody asked me what long-suffering meant, I would say it means patience. Long-suffering means patience. But obviously, he says patience and long-suffering. When I think of long-suffering, you think of this, I'm agonizingly waiting on something. But they're not quite the same. And, when we're being patient, we're enduring through a time of waiting. We're waiting for something, or we're waiting for certain circumstances, and it's endurance while we wait. I think everybody has a good grasp on patience in general, but long suffering is a little more. It's under persecution from other people, or under pressure from other people. It's kind of the image that you see of what the early church went through as they were oppressed many times. You may be being provoked. It's not just a matter of waiting for something. It's waiting for something while people or situations are actively making things worse and making it harder. It's probably a reason it's got the word suffering in it. Suffering for a long time, waiting for this to be overcome. Has anybody ever felt like that, where you're just waiting patiently for something to change, for God to answer a prayer, for maybe a long-suffering situation where a person or people are making that worse, and you're just trying to just get through it to the next day until you get out of this situation, or whoever's making it worse for you finally stops for whatever reason. How often do we do that with joy? Like, oh yes, I get to keep waiting on this. I've been hopping around with this broken foot for 6 months, but yay, we're not usually joyful. I did that once. That was miserable. It's not easy to be joyful when we're waiting, especially when we're waiting for something or through something that's difficult. But that's why we have to be strengthened with God's might, and it's got to be according to his glorious power. Because everything that in me that I can't do can be done with God in me. And when we really start to grasp that, maybe we've lived through a time or two, and we've seen how God's gotten us through those things, and how he's helped us to endure, and how we've come out stronger. At a certain point, maybe it clicks for you that I don't have to worry about these things, because God has proven every single time that he is not going to let me fall. I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I'm still kicking. That should be a source of joy in itself, because not everybody has that. There are a lot of people in this world who go through patient times and suffering times and struggling times, who don't know God, who know nothing about him, and are just breaking inside more and more and more and more. Those are the ones that need to hear those testimonies we were talking about earlier. Giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of his Son, the Son of his love, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins. And I would break that down a lot more, but I think that most of us have a pretty firm grasp of what this means. But I want us to think about the implications of it, and think of just how big this is. How big it is that we were living in a kingdom of darkness and we're in a kingdom of light now. Just think of how you would feel inside if you were about to get hit by a bus, and now you're no longer about to get hit by a bus. The danger that was coming at us compared to the hope, the eternal hope that we have before us now. shouldn't that cause us to make Christ preeminent in our lives? Man, I really like this thing, and I should put this before God because I like it so much. It makes me really happy. I mean, it didn't save me from eternal darkness and destruction, but man, it's fun. What is there in this life? What is there that could possibly be in our hearts that has moved us or saved us or healed us or helped us or blessed us eternally more so than what Christ has done? He is the image, speaking of Jesus, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist, and he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. He is not describing a Jesus like the Greeks are describing to him. He is not describing a Jesus like the heretics of that day were trying to weave through their churches. Some good person who happens to be a prophet or just say good things about God but isn't fully God and fully man like Jesus could not have been from the beginning, could not have created all things, and all things would not consist in him. All those things that I may be tempted to make preeminent over Jesus were created by him. He warns in Romans about worshiping the creation rather than the creator. How crazy is that? How crazy is it that there are people out there worshiping and bowing down before a carved hunk of wood that has no mind, no spirit, no life, nothing, but completely ignore the one who created it and them and everything else. No one is worthy of our worship like Jesus. That's why he must have the preeminence. He has to have the preeminence in our lives. And the more we understand that, the more abundant life we're going to live, the more richly we're going to appreciate all those other things. Like I said, those other things that creep in and tempt us to take the preeminence, they might not be a bad thing. But if I'm putting Jesus before that thing and above that thing and above everyone else, that's going to be even more enjoyable. It's going to be in its right perspective. Perspective is so key. Because when it's distorted, we can twist anything and everything in our lives. We can seek the wrong things. We can have negative understandings of good and godly things. Things get distorted. And we're living in a world where perspective is being intentionally distorted. There's a lot of false things out there in all kinds of different directions right now that Satan is working hard to confuse people in this world, to give them wrong ideas. And because of it, we're seeing negative and false things being taught about God. We're seeing negative and false things being taught about his believers. And don't get me wrong, there are believers in this world who are not keeping Christ preeminent, who are saying and doing bad things. But there's a distorted image out there that all of God's people are that way. And maybe it was a person who was hurt by a church that mistreated them. And they've gone on to believe that any church anywhere, everybody in it's going to treat them that way. Because people leave scars. You know, if you've got a friend who has betrayed your trust, you're going to have a hard time trusting other people. And that can happen with God's people too. But if we're keeping Christ as the head of the body, we're the body, the church. I'm not the head of this church. The people as a whole are not the head of this church. We might vote and make decisions and things like that, but every last one of us is under Christ because he is preeminent. And if he is preeminent over this church, and I'm a part of this church, then he should be preeminent over my life. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, I just pray that you would open our hearts and our eyes to have a greater vision and understanding of the things that hold our attention in life, the things that the things that we put our focus, our love, and our time into, Lord. And I just pray, Father, that you would be first above all those things. I pray that Christ would be first above all those things. I pray that we would have a greater understanding and wisdom that when we put you first, when we put Jesus first, every last other thing in this life is much more pleasurable, much more enjoyable, and our focus is kept in the right place through hope in you. In Jesus' name.